so I'm between you and lunch. I've got the title of Buyer Enablement to be more client-centric, and after those three, I can put you to sleep in 7 minutes. So I actually thought about this, and I kind of wanted to rename the session. It was more along the lines of, I'm really bored about hearing customer centricity. And don't get me wrong, it's not because I'm not interested in customers or having more of them, but I kind of think it's more useful to talk about buyer enablement, and there's a couple of reasons for this. One thing that's really clear to me is customer centricity is a destination rather than a solution to a problem. And when we start talking about buyer enablement, we're immediately getting a bit more proactive with what we're trying to do. So actually asking a question, how a demo, a piece of content, or an implementation enable the buyer is much more around action-orientated. It's more about what impact, what can it do, what lessons learned. Along with being a bit fed up with customer centricity, I'm coming immune to certain sales statements we always hear. And the one I think is from Serious Decisions, that 70% of the buyer's journey is completed before buyers even engage with sales. Now, we know today's journey doesn't start with downloading a white paper or a conversation at an event, and it's a lot more complex. But we've got to understand, how do we make it easier for the buyer going through the journey? And Gartner spent some time investigating the buyer journey and broke it into 6 stages, which I can never remember, so I'm just going to read them out, which is really quite, I think, succinct, which is problem identification, solution exploration, requirements building, supplier selection, validation, consensus creation. I'm doing it slow to make it last 7 minutes. So look, there's tons and tons of information out there, and I don't have to tell any of you, it's not sequential, it's not a linear journey. You know, you can have so many iterations when you're dealing with customers. But what we kind of got to look about is, what are the activities that buyers, if they need to complete this, how we support it. So asking ourselves internally and as a company, what do we do that supports those steps, irrespective of whether the buyer gets it from a website or directly from a rep. Because Gartner's understanding as well, is another stat I like, is customers who find content through their buying journey from vendors are 3 times more likely to buy. So the earlier we help influence customers in their buying journey, the more meaningful our relationships potentially can be. Giving voice to that, there was a survey done earlier this year, and it showed 60% of content created by marketing is never used. Rather than marketing focusing on constant efforts of white papers, thought leaderships, it's actually more focusing on action-oriented content, similar to what the guy, I've forgotten his name, at G2 was talking about early on, the how-to, the examples and lessons learned that buyers are really craving for. And let's face it, our buyers' reputation can be based around technology they recommend and their success. And clearly, if they don't have the confidence, the easiest decision is do nothing. So in the same way we're talking about enabling buyers, we also need to enable our sellers. I would say I do a sales enablement platform. But I think when you're thinking about that strategy, there is a point when those 2 parties meet, where customers and your sales meet, and it's about what additional value they bring. However, this concept around involving later and later in the sales journey, I don't necessarily 100% agree. And I am seeing the way that we leverage our personal networks, our social networks, and the content we use in creating conversations in that first part of the buyer journey. And I see them in 2 ways. And the best way I can explain it is, when I meet a customer, I'm trying to understand as quickly as possible, are they interested or are they evaluating? Because if a customer's interested, they're trying to get an insight into what value will, in my world, a sales enablement tool bring to their business. Whereas if they're evaluating, I'm usually late to the table, they've got budget, they've got people, and I've got to influence on how, in my example, HighSpot does it better. So understanding where they're on the buyer journey is very important in the approach you actually take. So I think for me, there's a couple of takeaways I want to leave everyone with, and it's very simple. Customer centricity has its place, but you need to start focusing on buyer enablement and practical examples of how to. How do I, lessons learned and examples from other customers. It's what we constantly get asked for than these white papers. Organize and create impactful content, but enable all touch points, including sales, to enable their buyers and ease the journey. Thank you.